Now, at the conclusion of the public hearing, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. And on that note, I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 4th regular meeting of Council. The first item on the regular meeting of Council is that the minutes of the Council meeting held March 19th, 2018 be adopted. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Before I get to an approval of the agenda, there has been one requested change this evening, namely the addition of a delegation by MacDonald Gray Consultants regarding the zoning amendment application at 249 Finholm Street. So I'll read you the two recommendations, and I'll need a mover and a seconder. That the delegation request from MacDonald Gray Consultants regarding the zoning amendment application at 249 Finholm Street be added to the agenda under item 4C, and that April 4th, 2018 council meeting agenda be approved as amended. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right, we're going to start off tonight with new business. And I'm going to start with Councillor Patterson. I'll move from left to right. Councillor Patterson, anything under new business? Councillor Oates, anything under new business? Councillor Beale, anything under new business? I'll go last.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd just like to let people know that a little later this month, April 18th, that's a Wednesday, there will be a homeless count. Parksville is one of a number of communities across the province that will be taking part in a homeless count in order to gather information about the reality for people who are homeless in our area. So this will take place April 18th, which is a Wednesday. The count will be conducted in a manner that's the same all across the province, so it's been set up by people with a survey and so on, completely anonymous, etc. And volunteers are needed in order to do this. There will be a training session for volunteers the week prior to the event. That's on April 11th. And if anyone is interested in learning more, I would recommend you contact the SOS to find out if this is something that might that is of interest of you, and if you are inclined to get involved to learn more about the situation. And then following that, the people at the provincial level will be gathering the data and then providing a summary and detailed stats for our particular community.
Thank you. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so under new business, I would like to make a motion that the Parksville Museum that the city grant permission to the Parksville District Historical Society to hold the 2018 Farmers Market on Sundays from May to September 2018 inclusively.
Seconded by Councillor Oates. Any discussion? Very straightforward.
Just some new folks working on the market.
Okay.
Connie Kuramoto and some other really great people, and they're quite excited to get going on it.
Okay. You have a question, Councillor Beale? Go ahead.
Thank you. Perhaps you mentioned it, but I'm just curious, what time is the market going to be held on Sundays, or do you have that information yet?
I don't have that information with me at the moment.
Councillor Oates?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff. Are there any concerns on the behalf of staff of us, of Council, granting this request?
Mrs. Comas?
No, Your Worship. They've been operating the farmers market for several years and have done it successfully without any problems to the city.
So on that note, I'm going to call the vote, unless there's any other questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried.
And just one other thing, and that is at the community garden. They're just very happy that they've got their fence up, and they're busy planting, so everyone's happy there. So
thank you. Councillor Burton, new business.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick note that the Community Park Master Plan Implementation Committee met yesterday. Councillor Beale and myself were in attendance with staff. It's a great process, moving very well. I think we've ticked off most of the short-term priorities and moving on to the medium-term priorities at the next meeting. So that's it for me.
Thank you. I've got a resolution, but before I go to the resolution, I'll go through some of the other items I have for new business. The Vancouver Island University women's volleyball team attended the CCAA National Championships and won gold. So I sent off a quick email to the president of VIU congratulating him, and I think there was a gal from Parksville on that team. Number 2, the city's wood chipping program is now underway and will run until April 24th. If you've got wood chipping to get rid of, make sure it's on the curb. The budget meeting scheduled for April the 9th has been canceled as Council approved the budget in principle on March 26th and directed staff to prepare the appropriate bylaw. And the annual Emergency Preparedness Expo, very important event, will be hosted by the City of Parksville, the Town of Qualicum Beach, and the RDN on Saturday, April the 28th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Qualicum Beach Civic Center. Residents will have the opportunity to learn about the challenges we will face in an emergency and to be better prepared. The expo features displays, demonstrations, and workshops. And information about the city items can be found on the city's website and Facebook page. Now to my resolution, members of council. This is the wording of the resolution that in response to the exemption announcement made by the BC Minister of Finance on March 26, 2018, Council rescind Resolution 18072 passed on March the 5th, 2018, resolving the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities request exemptions from the proposed province of the BC speculation tax. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Burden. Discussion. Councillor Burden.
I'd like to add an amendment that we would support any other municipality that is currently still impacted by the speculation tax in their efforts to have it removed.
Like Nanaimo and Lanceville.
And Langford and whoever else.
Can I get a seconder for that, or continue the discussion?
Actually, Your Worship, you need to move around a seconder.
Okay.
You're the chair.
So you're moving it. Councillor Salter seconded. Questions on the new motion, I guess. Councillor Oates.
Yeah, I would have preferred we defeated, we supported the original motion as worded, and then had another motion to the effect of what Councillor Burden wanted to do. Because now I don't know what we're doing, do this and then put a number 4 there, and we support anybody at, okay, then fine, I'm fine with that too.
So on the first motion, I have a mover and a seconder. Yes, Councillor Burden?
I'm happy to withdraw the amendment and make a motion after we deal with this first piece.
Okay, so on the original motion that I read, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Now we have a motion made by Councillor Burden and a seconded by Councillor Salter, which is?
A blank check. I'd like to make a motion that we support any member of the AVICC in their efforts to have to be exempted from the speculation tax.
I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. We have 3 delegations tonight, Council. The first delegation is the Vancouver Island Tribute Festival request for funding support, and I've got Ms. Judson and Ms. Schiebein. Are they in the audience? Turn the microphone on and welcome. I hear Elvis is coming back to town.
Elvis will be in the building.
Not true that he's dead. He's coming back to town. Thank you.
First of all, I'm Sharon and this is Sherry, and we'd like to just say thank you to you all for giving us the time to tell you a little bit about our festival. I have some little handouts, just so you can follow along as we speak. The current year festival is our 5th annual, and it's coming up in May 25th, 26th, 27th. It's a 3-day festival, and we bring in tribute artists from all over, usually the best in their genre, and they actually come to our festival because it's for a good cause. They do not charge us. They perform, they donate their performance, is what they do. Our festival is a fundraiser for the Nanaimo and District Hospital Foundation, which also covers the Oceanside Public Health, is that the name of it? Public Health Center. And the funds that we donate to them all go to medical equipment. This year we've got probably 14 tribute artists coming, the 3 that are on the flyer. Plus we have Neil Diamond, Buddy Holly, the Beatles are there. They're a real highlight. The Beatles are coming from Argentina. So not only that, but we have people coming to Parksville for the festival from not quite worldwide, but from as far afield as London, England. Last year we had a call from a lady in London, England. She saw it online and she said, we were going to come to BC anyway, but now we'll come to the island because that's where the festival is and we want to go. It's quite regular that we get people from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, Washington State, because we have a couple of wonderful tribute artists come from Washington State, Las Vegas. So we bring a lot of attention to Parksville and to the area, and I think we do a lot of good. We've donated quite adequately. The first year, if I could have just a minute to tell you how we got started. There were 4 of us friends that were sitting having coffee prior to an Elvis tribute artist show in Vancouver. And we said, okay, we got half an hour. Isn't it a shame that we have to come to Vancouver for these shows? You know, Parksville should get something like this. And then, well, if we're just going to do one show, what's the point? Why not do a whole festival? And then we decided from there that, well, we love Elvis, so does most people, but they also have other likes like Alan Jackson and Buddy Holly and Neil Diamond. Let's do a tribute festival. And of course, the first year we were all very timid, very shy, because none of us had done this before. We just attended many festivals. And we thought, well, if we have any money left over after we sell our tickets and pay the tribute artists' expenses, maybe I didn't mention that, we do pay their expenses while they're here. We pay their transportation, their gas and ferry expenses, and their hotel, and the Saturday night dinner for the tribute artists while they're here. But if we had any, the first year we're a little nervous about whether tickets would sell or not. And if we had any money left over, what will we do with it? We found out that the 4 of us that were sitting there having coffee were all cancer survivors. So what do you think our money was going to go? Was going to go to cancer. And see if we could pay back a little bit. But would we even get $100 that first year to pay back? I don't know. It was very intimidating, but very much fun. And we ended up contributing $4,000 to the Cancer Society. So we've moved along. Now it's the 5th annual festival, and we've been fortunate enough that we've been able to give a donation to the Cancer Society the first 3 years. And now last year we decided to work with the Nanaimo and District Hospital Foundation, and we hope that we can make our 5th anniversary bigger and better than ever and really make them proud of us and you proud of us. I'd like to refer to a festival that is held in Penticton every year. It's all Elvis, but it attracts people from all over North America. And their city gets right involved with it. They have different events here and there through the city pertaining to this Elvis festival. They have people come from all over the world. They have contestants and entertainers come from Britain. Now, Britain has somehow got really interested in Penticton. The biggest festival, music festival, tribute artist festival in the world is in Canada. It's in Collingwood, Ontario. And the whole town is involved. The windows of all the stores on the main street are decorated with the tribute artists, again, Elvis mostly, but Elvis is everywhere. They have a Main Street parade, which we have tried to do each year, except last year got rained out, but nobody knows about our parade because we haven't got the funding to promote it properly, to advertise it properly. We do some advertising. We did mention that there was going to be a parade, but unfortunately we have all our tribute artists in convertibles, and one of them has a sound system in his truck that he brings from the Okanagan, and we've gone through town, but there's nobody to look because we need some help financially to get some advertising done so that we get people out. Parksville benefits because so many tourists come. We do this on a weekend that's not a high tourist weekend. We've chosen the weekend after the long weekend. And it's always the same weekend after the long weekend, which is normally very quiet in Parksville. And so we chose that weekend in the hopes that we'd bring some more business in. And we've been really successful. We have a block of rooms booked at the Bayside Inn, and they sell out every year. They sell out. So restaurants benefit, the bars, of course, benefit, taxi companies benefit. I think that we do really help the city and the area of Parksville in that respect by bringing all these people in. Washington State, the tribute artists that come up from Washington bring a slew of fans with them. They follow them, and a lot of them have never been to Parksville before. A lot of them, they decide, well, if we're going to go, let's take a few days holiday. And I think that's a wonderful thing. There's a little town in BC, in Barrier, BC, that's up north of Kamloops. They've recently started a festival, and they're out in the boondocks. They're way out of town, but Barrier, the town, supports them completely. It's awesome how the growth of these events, because they're so popular. People love them. And that we're feeding off each other. The Barrier one, they were just Elvis. Well, now they're borrowed our Judson, they borrowed our Alan Jackson, and we're borrowing one of their Elvises. And you know, we're playing teamwork. We're going back and forth, and it's been really fun that way. I did tell you that we pay the expenses for the tribute artists. That's one of our biggest expenses. The hall rental, another problem we're faced with this year is that everything has gone up. The hall rental has risen. All the prices, the hotel costs have risen. And the merchants, normally we spend January, February, and March approaching merchants and people to sponsor us, to help with donations and silent auction gifts if they don't want to contribute financially. And this year, people are finding it more difficult to contribute. Budgets are tight, money is tight, so we're having a little more problem there. That's maybe another reason why we're here. We need to get more sponsors. We need volunteers. We also need more volunteers. We're finding that for one reason or another, we've lost some of our key volunteers. If anybody knows of anybody that is eager to get into the music business, so to speak, and volunteer time, and it's a lot of fun. It's always been a great time. We have people leave the hall after a show and say, can we buy our tickets for next year? We've had tribute artists that leave the show and say, will you invite me back next year? It's really been a good time.
So you're looking for assistance to cover the cost of the facility rental, which is how much? $1,500?
20. It's gone up. 26. 46.
Okay.
Plus the sign that goes at the entrance to Parksville. There's Welcome to Parksville sign.
Fine.
The one on the highway, the exit. Yeah.
Okay.
We've been having to pay for that sign, and I think it would be a really good thing for the city to help us pay for that.
Well, first of all, I have the pleasure of opening the show, and I'm delighted. I've been doing it now for a couple of years, and I want to congratulate you for the money that you've raised for cancer that's affected all of us. I mean, I don't think of anybody in this room that hasn't had a sibling or a mother or a father or an aunt or an uncle or a cousin that hasn't been affected by cancer. And it's a great tribute to you for putting on this tribute festival. So now I'm going to turn it over to members of council if they have any questions. Did you want to make a comment, Councillor Burt?
I know somebody that can help you look after the sign part.
Oh, do you? That would be awesome.
Okay.
I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Get his phone number before you leave. Councillor Ode.
So I just want to know clearly what the ask is of council tonight. What is it you'd like to see us do? To cover the cost of the rental there to 2646, is that what it is?
2646 is the, when it's held in the Parksville Convention Community Center.
I'll make the motion that the city cover the cost of the community center for the rental for the Tribute Festival.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by
Councillor
Councillor Patterson. Councillor Patterson had her hand up. I was looking. Okay, any discussion on that motion? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. And I've been a couple times to some of the past performances, and I do know that it does bring quite a bit of people to the area, as I have a business in the downtown. But what I'd really appreciate seeing maybe in the future, and I'm just going to put it out there right now, is that we do go through a budget process. And I would have liked to have seen this prior to our last council meeting where we passed our budget so that it would be included. So I'm just going to put that out there right now for future years and maybe come and see us earlier.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. Actually, first of all, a question to Councillor Oates. Councillor Oates, I'm not clear where the money is coming from to pay for this. What's your intention there? If it's from, oh, sorry, I missed that bit. From contingency. Okay, that's great. And I would just like to say that I do think that the Tribute Festival is a lovely, it's a lovely idea, and hats off to you for having successfully run it for so many years. The time of the year is great because it really extends the the opportunities both for locals and for tourists coming here. I will say, and I'm also pleased to see that in terms of the donation, that it's going to the Hospital Foundation. As you mentioned, the Hospital Foundation is in fact one that affects everyone in our town. We do, in our city, we pay into the Hospital Foundation, and I find that, I'm much more comfortable supporting something going to that than to specific charities. I know that we're affected by them, but still there are so many individual charities. I don't think it's my role to decide how the city is basically giving money to go to a particular charity. But that being said, I'd also like to, you've done an amazing job. I'm a little concerned that perhaps you didn't foresee some rising costs and set aside enough money so that you really were able to start this coming year, regardless of maybe wanting to get some additional support from the city. And I would hope that you'd be able to do that effectively in the future, because I think like anyone, you want to plan ahead, and I realize that it's going for a good cause, but it's also, if it falls apart and the festival falls apart, then there is no generation of funds to be able to pay forward. So I think it's really important to pay yourself first and to set aside a really good chunk of money so that you got that going forward and into the coming year, because I do support it. I think it's important for our area, and like other events that I and our council has supported, we also hope that it's seed money and that as much as possible something can be self-sustaining, which is not to say that we don't want to support it as well.
No.
Okay. So,
no, I understand.
I think the message is quite clear. Stay tuned for the budget meetings for next year, for 2019, and
Absolutely.
come to the budget meetings and make your requests. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a seconder, Councillor Oates.
I want to say one other thing. I really do hope that it does succeed. I'm a big fan of music festivals. I think they do add to a community. I think there might be opportunities here for this particular genre in this area. One of the things that I like when I go to Salmon Arm, for example, when I go to the Roots and Blues Festival, is I like the satellite workshops that happen at some of the different places. I remember going to the Legion there last year and seeing one of the performers that was later at the Roots and Blues. And I don't know if you've ever given any thought to having performances outside of the venue that you've rented there, if any of the local establishments around town might be interested in hosting some of the people. It's something that I'd like to see and would certainly give more of a widespread attention to the product that you're selling, which I think is really good.
Yeah, we always have one go to the Legion, and the casino in Nanaimo actually takes one, and Victoria actually takes one of the tribute artists each year. I think maybe Nanaimo didn't last year, but okay, yeah. Yeah. So we do try to do that. I'd like to get them as much. Actually, a lot of those tribute artists that don't live in this area have received a number of gigs, paying gigs, as a result of the festival. A lot of them have told us that. And this particular one that goes to the Legion, every year they call him back now, he particularly has commended us for the fact that he's now well known on the island.
Councillor Oates made a comment off the microphone about maybe having somebody come to council. It just so happens that on the 23rd of May, which is 2 days before the council starts, 2 days before the tribute festival starts, we have a council meeting that night. So if anybody's in town, we'll give them 10 minutes. Okay. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to say, actually, I have in the past had to arrange many different things, you know, houses and clinics and so on. And I know the work that's involved and all of the stress that happens. And then there's that, you know, hoping that it works out. And yes, there certainly is always a financial piece involved. From what I see in your numbers, in your presentation, from what I've heard, you have already overcome a lot of hurdles. You understand what you're up against, and you've been successful. And so I expect you will continue to be successful and continue to learn as you go. Exactly. And I think that you've moved this beyond entertainment and into giving back to the community and giving back to really not just Parksville area, but to really anyone who's going to be utilizing the hospitals and the medical system. So I just really want to thank you for that, and I think you've done a fantastic job, and I believe you will continue to do so. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to call the vote. We have a mover and a seconder from the contingency fund. We haven't done that yet. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And thank you very much. We'll see you on the 25th.
You will. You sure
I'll be wearing my blue suede shoes.
All right.
All right.
That's what I like to hear.
I used to have a pair of blue suede shoes.
I did too.
I used to have a pair of white bucks. I used to wear white bucks.
Okay.
Okay, members of council, our next delegation is the Qualicum Education and Wellness Society, and it's Judy. Is it Judy and I know Carol. Is Carol here? And Judy, have I got that right? Or are you alone? Oh, okay. Sorry. Come on down. This is a presentation on equality, affordable childcare to provide information about community opportunities to support the BC government children initiatives. Welcome. Make yourself at home.
Yes, thank you very much for letting us share some information about the work that we've been doing. My name's Carol O'Connor. I am a member of the Early Education of BC and represent the island network of BC. And I'll let you know about our other members. Bill Preston is the president of Qualicum Education and Wellness Society. Judy, who couldn't make it tonight, is the manager of Oceanside Building Learning Together and with the School District 69. And Skipsy is also on our table, and she is a Qualicum Town Councillor. Linda DeCaucus is here tonight. She's with Pacific Care Childcare Resource and Referral Program. And Pam Moore, who's not able to make it tonight, is the EC manager of Qualicum First Nations Childcare Society. Perry Bow and Wendy Ramrier and Jacqueline Russell are here tonight, all representing the Canadian Federation University Women's Group, and Wendy is the chair of the Global Outreach, and Jacqueline is the president. We're all been working for the last couple of years on sort of supporting the mission of our society, the Qualicum Education and Wellness Society, and one of the strong missions that organization has is to advocate and act upon principles of community of all ages and abilities together to identify and link community needs and resources. So that's one of the parts that brought us together, was the fact that we identified that childcare was not accessible to many families. We identified that infant toddler care in the area was really not even available if affordable. And so we started to work on looking at ways of thinking about how we could expand the community knowledge about the importance of childcare, and just look at ways of seeing how the community could come together to support more space, specifically infant toddler care. Over the last several years, we've worked on looking at community solutions. We've worked with a senior housing facility group to look at intergenerational care, how that fits in with the using infrastructure within a community. We're here today, excited to talk to you about the BC government plan that in the recent budget highlighted the building of a universal childcare system in BC, and that really is a lot of what the original $10 a day plan talked about. So the province is looking at a series of measures to start to build an infrastructure for early childhood education and facilities for children. One of the exciting things that we want to try and address is that families, low-income families of 45,000 and less, will basically see a no-cost care starting at the end of September, so they're eligible for childcare at no cost. However, that we know is going to be a problem in most communities, and this one as well, in that there are no spaces to accommodate those families. So the fact that they would be eligible for no-cost childcare really doesn't give them the opportunity because the space isn't there. The government has allocated $237 million over the next few years to ensure that money go to communities to provide childcare spaces. But one of the things the plan asks is that we collaborate with local governments and community and public spaces to create childcare to meet family needs and to identify family needs. So dollars will be given to projects that effectively utilize public resources through retrofitting of existing buildings or infrastructure. And they also highlight that school spaces would facilitate streamless transitions for families. So as a table, we have anecdotal evidence that childcare spaces are up to 2- and 3-year waiting list in some centers. And so our request is that councillors support the developing need that we would require on a needs assessment to ensure that we strengthen that understanding of our community needs for a grant application that would build more spaces in our community. We have to commend the Parksville Community Planning for their recent ensuring that childcare space is included in the senior home in construction, and request that time continue to be spent in additional, looking for additional opportunities for retrofitting and co-locating of childcare in public and community buildings. And the table would like to invite a member of the council to sit at our table meetings to support further collaboration. We'd like to say that we appreciate the time that you're taking to just learn a little bit more about the work that we've been doing, and also the work that needs to be done in communities to make sure that families have access to these opportunities, and fee reduction and available childcare space will go a long way to supporting families' financial future.
Thank you very, very much, and it's such an important factor in our community. You know, we use the term, it's kind of overused, but the children are our future, and we've got to provide the best quality childcare we can. Just for council's information, I met Carol and her colleagues several weeks ago, and after that meeting, I decided to call the director of planning. The CAO wasn't here, so I picked up the phone and called the director of planning. Didn't want to bother the CAO; she was somewhere else, and a meeting. And the director of planning informed me that this new facility that's being looked at next door, they have a plan for childcare services, which is wonderful, because you've got the older generation and the younger generation being in the same building. So, and we know from watching different situations, different programs, and different things that are being done in other communities across the country, that mixing the old and the new is a great idea. I know that every time I see my young grandkids. Okay, questions from members of council. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for your presentation. That was very interesting. I have a couple questions. Well, you mentioned utilizing schools. So do you mean schools that are open and children are in them now, or do you mean the schools that are being closed over the years and utilizing those buildings now for daycare? Is that what
Yeah,
both?
The province is really looking at ways of communities finding space that already is available in the community, whether not being used or finding some way to fit it in. They are paying dollars for retrofitting, adding more space on, putting portables possibly on school property. I think one of the things it talks about in the document is that making it an easy transition for families, so childcare being part of where children are, that they just continue on. And so schools were one of the things mentioned.
Surprised. I know you're surprised. And so my next question is, you said there's approximately $237 million, I assume, to be shared throughout the province. Is there an amount that goes per community, or is it per project that these dollars?
Yeah, as far as I know, they haven't put any cap on what a community would access, and some of the conversation that we've had with the Child Care Coalition, they're saying the sooner communities get their asks in, the more opportunity possibly to be first in line.
Okay.
And part of it would be this needs assessment that we would have to gather some more information. And like Bill reminded me, we are planning to talk to school boards as well
And then
to share this
one
information.
last.
Yes.
One last follow-up.
So, and then as far as, I mean, as I believe I heard you say, you may have the venue, but where's the care provider? Like how do you have any ideas around how you're going to be able to get care providers to staff the daycares? Because I think that's where the issue is, kind of like our
Some
doctor
of the
shortage.
issue, for sure. Yeah.
How do you plan on?
From what we hear, I mean, and things are trickling out of the ministry right now as they try and develop the plan. But I think that their plan has been that they send that information out to communities, try to get communities involved in thinking about where childcare could be offered, and then they have plans in their budget to increase the wages for childcare providers. Hopefully we can bring some childcare providers back to the field. There is a piece of work that they're doing to try and address the issue of not enough childcare providers currently, but that's also based on the fact that currently the wages aren't very attractive. So if we improve the wages, hopefully we can.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Salter touched on a couple of my questions. You haven't met with anyone from any of the school trustees as of yet?
So
or started
tonight
any
is-
of their budget, or attended any of their budget presentations?
Because the BC
Yeah.
budget just came out, really tonight is our first presentation, and we have a number of presentations planned for the Oceanside area. Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Can I just respond to that too? Yeah. So one of the things that we're doing, that this table is doing, is trying to bring together all the levels of local government, including the school district. So this is a complex, as you can appreciate, a complex project, and it does involve increasing pay to make this field of work more attractive to people, and part of the funding will also go to people to be trained in the field. So this is going to take time, but what we want to do is create a regional sort of structure that includes all the local councils, the school district, so that we can speak as a whole area and be first in line, well prepared to receive the money when it comes off of the bus. So that's why we're asking if one of the councillors could have this as one of your functions to be
Follow up from Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do have a couple more little comments, and that because when you talk about wages and we talk about minimum wage going up by 2021, and as I've said, and I make it very clear that I'm a small business person and that I try and educate and have people working in this community, but some of my hardships that I find is that some of my staff have daycare issues, and obviously, and it's very difficult for them to work and to pay for their daycare and to have daycare accessible in off hours, and that not just 9 to 5. So I'm sure that myself or maybe Councillor Beale would be more than happy to sit with your group on that. So I'm not putting you on the spot. If you, but if you don't, then I will. Or the mayor would be more than happy, I'm sure, to ask around the table. Thank you for your presentation.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you. And I, too, would just like to add my thanks for bringing this forward, not only for us, but for the benefit of everyone here. And I will certainly attest to the seamlessness when we do have the space in school so that you can offer, whether it be preschool and or daycare and after school care, where kids can just go from their classroom to the other space. Of course, it's not always possible. I know for a fact that a number of our schools nearby are very, very full, but certainly it's a model that can work very well, and children and parents are so comfortable in the environment. So I wanted to say that. And also, I will borrow a quote from our mayor. I don't know if he's got, rights on this, but as he would say, to credit to the collaboration, because it is so important. As our mayor has often said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So, and I think that this whole area has a really good track record of the various agencies and stakeholders working together, and I know that I do know that I'll leave it to our mayor to go from there, but I know that there'll be interest in taking part in this.
What I'd like you to do, Carol, is send me an email describing what the task is going to be. You want a council rep, what the task is going to be, how often and that sort of thing. Give me as much information, and because I think I've got more than one that's interested, so I'm going to have to play King Solomon. Councillor Oates.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. There certainly is more than two on council that are interested in the initiative. What I want to know is when you say you're requesting council support in developing a needs assessment tool, what does that look like?
My understanding is that the ministry is working on what they would like that needs assessment to include. So at this point, we haven't got that information yet. But I think from other communities that I've read online, it's really however a community decides to address the needs of that community. So, how do we find out how many families would need after-hours care? What kinds of care is required? And I think the absolutely wonderful thing about this provincial initiative is that they are putting it to communities to develop specific to that community need. The language is really strong to say that the community, that they're respecting community information. So childcare is always going to be an issue, and things change in demographics and all of those other ways. So I do think that as a community to be able to be a cohesive group and to be continually assessing how effective are being met.
I think I'd go out on a limb and say council is supportive of any initiatives that are being undertaken with respect to the child care issue. But in order for us to make motions, we'd require some specifics. So that's the reason why, that's the nexus of my question. Certainly, if there is anything that council can do with respect to specifics, I encourage you to come forward. I encourage you to do what the mayor said, send a letter in asking for the representative to be placed on your committee. But if there's anything that the city can do, that this council can do, that can put you in a good position with respect to grant applications, I think that you're going to get a pretty favorable result when the motion goes forward.
Yes, and I just want to comment. We've been duly impressed by the openness and the willingness to embrace this from the mayor and from the council. So we really appreciate that. And our sort of the reason we call it a table is meant to be because our MO is to collaborate, right? And the more we can work together, I loved your quote from the mayor, because I think we can build something for the area, for the region, that's that's going to make a huge difference, because there are people who need daycare out of the regular hours, like you mentioned, and there's so many people. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the cost, the present cost of childcare makes it really, really difficult. So this should open up a whole number of folks who are available to work in the community because they have affordable and quality childcare.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I echo a lot of the comments that I've heard around the table and commend you actually for your approach as far as collaboration. There's a number of other groups in the community that you probably want to connect with beyond the school district. And I know certainly from listening to the voices of the business community, the issue with human resources that the lack of childcare in our community creates. And I also hear from a number of people who used to be in the field and aren't anymore for the reasons that you outlined, that the low wages, and if you could convince the government to provide a little bit more funding in terms of providing for those families who want to work in the field, I think that'll be a good thing too. So, thanks.
We anticipate contacting the chambers and working with them too, because we think that the business sector knows, in terms of needs assessment, they're a key group to ask.
Absolutely.
Just following up on Councillor Oates' questions, one of the things that was in the back of my mind, and I'm just thinking out loud, I'm not going anywhere with this tonight, but when we have large projects that are being proposed, you know, the space requirements are not all that great. And I'm wondering, you know, as a city, if we had a policy, we couldn't force people, but we could go to people and say, you know, because we ask for money for the fire department, we ask for all sorts of things. Yeah. Could you provide, I know, 800 or 1,000 square feet of space in your building with these kinds of amenities so that we could have a child care center? I think there's potential there. But anyway, I'll leave that for another time. Thank you very much for coming. Get me an email as soon as possible, and I'll get back to you with maybe more than one name to sit on your committee. Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, the third delegation we have tonight, Council, is the MacDonald Gray Consultants. And Nigel Gray, no stranger to this Council, regarding a zoning amendment application at 249 Finholm Street. Welcome.
Guy, sorry. Sorry, yeah, that's the one. I'll just use the PDF. Yeah, I think it just changed while we were sitting here. Thank you once again, Your Worship and Council, for the late addition. We weren't aware of the new policy, so next time we will get our request in on time. That said, I'm happy to be here to introduce you to the 249 Finholm zoning amendment application. This one's pretty straightforward, so I will try to be brief and save time in the meeting tonight. This is fine. Yeah, unless you can't see it. I think you guys have the better view up here in the front. Just to give you an idea of context, this is the Island Highway, running with the two yellow lines, Finholm Street, Marks Nature Park, Forsyth, and Blanken Avenue. This is a large leftover parcel that has some really unique geometry, so thus the rezoning. It doesn't really work with the single-family configuration, which is probably why it's been sitting this way for so long. The current zoning, as I mentioned right now, is single-family RS1. That zoning has been in place for some time and the land has not been developed. I think that site has been recognized. This is just the current zoning right now. You can see the adjacencies. The neighborhood has been evolving into kind of what the higher density configuration the community has been envisioning for the future. So there's a strata CD zone here, an RS2 site, which we are going to mimic on our site, hopefully. And it's showing how that density is moving into this area. And there's a small commercial component with the store and the additional, what's now the floor store. I believe Ballard Homes is out there as well. So we looked at the first thing we do always is look at the planning framework. So the City of Parksville has identified this site for higher density. The OCP designated it as transitional. And you are all very familiar with the language contained therein. It is intended to be a medium density development, and it is intended to transition between the existing single-family homes and the adjacent multifamily sites. I believe there was a mixed-use designation out on the highway as well. You can see here, this is the OCP map. The already developed areas to that density are designated as transitional. There's some multi that's supposed to be located on the highway, and that is obviously intended to interface with the mixed use and the community use. So what we are proposing does fit completely within the transitional residential designation. And I should note, because this is just a land use discussion, but we do our due diligence in the background to make sure that what we're proposing as a land use actually works, which is why we show the plans to council when we come here and ask for rezoning. So right now, the proof of concept that we came up with after probably 20 plan iterations is 22 ground-oriented townhome units and 30 small lot single-family homes. I should note that these are not as small as most of the small lots you see around town. In this case, the developer's looking at a 430 square meter lot, which is more like a medium density lot in Parksville, where your minimum lot size is 560. So it's just a little bit smaller than your standard single-family configuration. That works out to about 4,600 square feet in Imperial, for those of us who are by Unitol. So this is just a quick rendering of what it could look like. Yeah, go ahead, interrupt me at any time. Yeah, shoot.
On your small lot, what's your frontage?
It's, we're aiming for 16 meters, which is well above the 10 meter minimum, or I believe it's 14. Depends if you're on a curved street or not. Don't quote me on that. Blaine knows better than I do. Anyways, it's 16. A standard single-family lot is 18, so it's 6 feet shorter in width. Thank you. So just so you can see on the proof of concept, obviously this is a pretty picture. There will be a development permit process for the entirety of this development. So even the intensive residential small lot component will require a development permit, as will the multifamily site. So this is, as I said, just a proof of concept. There will be future plans to come forward. The proposed zoning on the multifamily site is RS2, and that is consistent with the adjacent zoning to the north. And the proposed zoning, as I said, is small lot residential, and we went through the lot size comparisons with the adjacencies. The lots that exist on Finholm right now are actually quite big because they're left over from earlier expansions of the city boundary. So you can see here, this is the proposed land use configuration we'd like to see as it ends up in the zoning bylaw, so RS2 to blend with the RS2. There are obviously guidelines within the development permit areas to mitigate any kind of adjacency with a single family, which was actually addressed earlier in a presentation by the proponent of the public hearing project. SLR1 may be configured like this. As I said, the road layout needs to be confirmed in the subdivision application. We have just completed our traffic impact analysis, and it's come back saying this is okay, but we will look at that again during a subdivision application. As I said, the traffic study has come back in, and it shows adequate capacity and no mitigation. We've also, as a proof of concept, provided the city with sewer flow analysis, water supply, and fire flow calculations. And we are undertaking a stormwater management plan. There is a ditch at the back of the property that actually sits in an easement. I was out there in the winter, and it was not the greatest condition in terms of erosion and siltation, so that would be mitigated as a function of this project either way. In terms of community benefit, these are just on the table right now. Obviously, we want the chance to go talk to the neighbors and see if they have any pet projects in the neighborhood that they would like to see an amenity contributed towards. And in the end, it is a council decision. But right now, we have an ask from the engineering department, which is to continue the sidewalk between our address at 249 and the intersection of 19A. It's not a big piece, but it is a logical extension of the sidewalk to progress that up to the intersection and provide a safe place for people to walk. The fire department contribution is something that we put forward, and that is the typical $800 a unit. As I said, if there's something else council would like that to go towards, such as what the really hard act to follow ladies just brought up, festivals and what have you, that is entirely in your hands. So providing a use that is responding to community need, obviously we're improving the available mix of housing. This is something that is desperately needed here in Parksville, and while we'd like to push for higher density, this is what we're comfortable with on this project. There is another opportunity related to this project, and that's the opportunity to close some of these road stubs that have just been sitting out there for I have no idea how long, as a component of the original subdivisions that came through probably pre-1990. See here on the map, we have a laneway which we may or may not need for the RS2 site. And there's this road stub right here that obviously was intended to come through, but that is an excellent opportunity, and I'm not trying to steal your mandate or anything like that, but there's an opportunity for that to become a lot that the city either flips or donates to somebody like Habitat for Humanity. So there's an opportunity there that just comes out of the configuration of this subdivision. So what are we asking for tonight? All we're asking for is the nod from council. So first reading. As always, after this meeting, we will proceed out to the neighbors and have our own public information meeting, and we will seek input from the neighbors and respond accordingly. If there's any surprises there, we may come back and present at second reading just to inform you of what those were. But beyond that, that is the cusp of the presentation. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Gray? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, how are people going to access this? Is it going to be off 19A, or is it going to be...
So primary access would be from the intersection at Finholm, and then there would be a connection from Pym down Blanken. So that's actually why the traffic report came back so well, is because there are a number of ways of getting into this site, and it doesn't provide a direct straight through rat run to 19A. What we're not showing is what's currently proposed on the adjacent site. I believe they have, I don't want to speak to their project, but I think they have a right-in, right-out at 19A. So there's not a real path through this development. So one thing I didn't mention that we're working with the engineering department on is actually there is an easement coming in here from the intersection right beside Ballard Homes, and there's that, I believe that's that blue bed and breakfast. But we need to run services through this piece anyway, so that may be an opportunity to provide a pedestrian path connection. We will have to realign that during subdivision, but yeah, I think it's a great idea. It would provide an opportunity for all of these people in this neighborhood to walk from their neighborhood straight across and down to the beach without getting into their cars and all those good things. Yeah.
Follow up? No?
No.
Oh. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Gray? Thank you very much, Nigel.
Thank you, and thanks to staff for all their help during the project.
Okay, members of council, we're moving on to reports. And the first item is the Community Park Ventureland surfacing. Mr. Figuera, would you please give us the background on this issue? And I need a mover and a seconder before moving on. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Mr. Figuera, over to you.
Your Worship, before Council is a report to request Council authorization to enter into a contract with Marathon Surfaces for a 5-year term to proceed with purchasing to proceed with surfacing of the Community Park Ventureland Playground in the amount of $130,000 plus tax for 2018, and then $80,000 annually for the 4 remaining years, 2019 through 2022. The existing sand surface in the playground has been determined to shorten the life of the various equipment that's located in the playground. It's also a substandard fall surface and requires much higher maintenance than the proposed rubber surface. So Council has approved funding for this project in the current financial plan. Purchasing policy requires staff to seek Council approval to award the contract, and the lowest bid received, as the lowest bid received exceeds $100,000. Our recommendations are as per the report.
Any questions from members of council for Mr. Figueroa? The report's really straightforward. I have a mover and a seconder. Pardon me? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. We'll have a much better surface park. Okay, the next report, following up on Mr. Gray's presentation, is the consideration of a zoning and development bylaw amendment application at 249 Finholm Street North. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Salter. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this project?
Sure. I'm not going to add too much here, as I believe it's been covered off pretty well in the presentation, but it is a rezoning application to change the zoning on the property from single-family residential, with a portion of the property being proposed to be rezoned to RS2 medium-density residential, another approximately half the property to single lot residential, with a small remaining portion to remain under the current zoning. And if there's any further questions to me, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Russell? Seeing none, I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor of the 4 recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Okay. We have a follow-up report, consideration of an application to permanently change the license capacity of the lounge at Tinamara Resort, 1155 Resort Drive. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Mr. Russell, once again, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. The application is proposed to change the license capacity of an existing lounge from 60 to 77 persons as a result of a proposed expansion into an existing dining room. Since this application was last presented to Council, 2 newspaper ads have been run, as well as a notice sign posted on the subject property. For more details are provided in the report on the timing of those. Since that opportunity for comment was provided, no correspondence have been received. And for Council's consideration this evening is to provide whether or not to provide a recommendation to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Fairly straightforward. Any questions for Mr. Russell? Councillor Oates.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This simply, all this does is allows the occupant load to go up by 17 people. It does not allow the use of the building to be changed. Like it doesn't change from some category to another category because of its occupant load. We're not, in effect, by doing this, also allowing an ancillary use for the property.
If I may, worship through to Councillor Oates. So. It's expanding the physically inside the premise. It's expanding the portion of the building that will be utilized as a lounge. So it's expanding the liquor primary use of the lounge inside the building. But the zoning itself, it's fully in compliant with the zoning. The zoning of a hotel of more than 30 units allows for a neighborhood pub. There's actually, yes, or a much larger size.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call them. All those in favor of the 4 motions that I'm taking all at once, thank you. That is carried unanimously. All right, Parks and Public Open Spaces Bylaw Amendment. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Salter, Councillor Burden. Mrs. Keller, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This report seeks council approval for a bylaw amendment to add the recently acquired park to the current bylaw that we have in place regarding the use of parks and public spaces. And this would specifically add that area to what we call a sensitive area, which limits the ability for people to use that area for overnight camping.
I believe we're calling it the Parksville Wetlands area.
Yes.
Is that correct? Councillor Burton.
I'd actually like to make that motion that we refer to it as the Parksville Wetlands.
I thought you already did.
Well, we did during the budget process, but I don't know if it extends to...
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I believe in the budget presentation it was specific. The resolution was specific to the budget financial plan, so it probably would be appropriate to get that resolution at this point.
Do you want to make that motion, Councillor?
I would like to make that.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Salter.
The motion is
called Parksville Wetlands.
Yes.
I have a seconder and Councillor Salter. Any comments or questions or Councillor Beal?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a question to staff. Are there any concerns, issues for staff regarding this request?
Mrs. Comas?
Your Worship, we don't have any issues per se. Council has in the past discussed different ways of obtaining a new name for the park, which would be reflected through First Nations heritage in the area. Whether or not this could be construed as establishing a new name is entirely up to Council's purview. So from a technical perspective, it doesn't cause us any issues, but Council has discussed in the past an appropriate naming process, which hasn't been undertaken at this point in time.
We still have that option. Councillor Oates and then Councillor Burton.
Yeah, what I would think, my interpretation of what it be is that it's been unofficially referred to as to what it's been referred to, and until such time as it's officially named, we refer to it as the Parksville Wetlands, and not to be construed as us making a decision on what the name of that property should be. I think there's a unique opportunity for us to engage the community in naming that piece of property, but it irks me that we open our meetings and recognizing the people of the Coast Salish First Nation, and yet we refer to a First Nation in Alberta, which was simply fee simple land, and that just bugs me. So I'd like to see it called something else until such time someone gives it a better name than what it has.
Councillor Burton, you want to add to that?
What he said, with the addition that there's a history of the larger portion of the lands that were purchased and developed that irks me. Some of the consequences that came out of that. So we're not renaming a piece of land, we're re-referring. So, at some point when we begin the development process on that land, we'll want to consult the public and our neighbors with regard to what we should be naming it formally. But in the meantime, I'd like to see it referred to as the Parksville Wetlands.
So now I'm confused. We've got a recommendation, items 1 and 2. I have a mover and a seconder. Let me deal with that first. All those in favor? And then the second recommendation is that it be referred to as the park until further notice as the Parksville Wetlands. I have a mover and a seconder for that too, don't I? Councillor Oates.
Just for clarity, Your Worship, what I would like to see happen is I'd like to see the 4 references to that name that are in the proposed bylaw. Are we doing the bylaw now? We're doing the bylaw later tonight, is it? Okay.
Mrs. Coleman.
Yes, Your Worship. If Council passes this now, you can't amend a bylaw that hasn't had any readings yet. So we would just refer in the bylaw to the Ermineskin lands and to the Parksville Wetlands, and make the appropriate changes because Council is doing this in advance of the bylaw readings.
That.
So does that mean then we're voting on these two recommendations, and the report that we're receiving, we're going to replace Ermineskin Park with Parksville wetlands everywhere? Is that what I understand is going to happen?
Your Worship, what would be the most technically correct way of doing this is for Councillor Burden to make an amendment motion to add a third point to the recommendations, that the property be referred to Parksville, to be referred as Parksville wetlands until such time as an official name is approved. And then that will have the effect of changing the bylaw. Council won't have to worry about the bylaw.
So moved.
Seconder, Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Okay, the next report is the unsightly properties at 270 Alberni Highway and 150 Despard Avenue West. Before I ask for a mover and a seconder, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to this item? Please come down and state your name and civic address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Paul Rijtsma, 410 Harnish. I just had some irking going around tonight, and I'd like to be the third one to express irked. There's always been a nuisance to have unsightly premises. This particular two pieces on the Alberni Highway and Despard, are they owned by a numbered company, are they? Are they within Parksville?
Pardon me?
Your Worship, the opportunity to speak was only for the property owner.
Oh,
if
okay,
they
sorry.
chose to.
Unless you're a property owner.
No, okay, fair enough.
Sorry about that.
Is there an opportunity to speak later?
Yeah, it said if the property owner or their designated representative.
Okay. Is there an opportunity to speak
When I
later?
saw you get up, I thought you were maybe a designated
No.
representative. Sorry. Okay, I'll repeat the offer. Is there a property owner or a designated representative in the room that wishes to speak to this? Okay. All right, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations, two recommendations. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Salter. Pictures say 1,000 words. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this area, is this the area that's about to be developed, though? No.
the street.
Oh, it's across the street. Okay.
I don't think I need, the pictures say 1,000 words. I don't think I need a move. I don't think I need any comments from staff. Councillor Burton, do I need comments from staff?
I don't believe you need comments from staff. I'd like to ask a question of staff, if that's okay. Is this an opportunity to also request some sort of a lifting of the canopy to improve visibility so that we don't have a recurrence?
Who wants to answer that? Mrs. Kaler?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Burden, our bylaw enforcement officers have been working quite intensively with the property owner, and that is one of the things that has been suggested. We had the bylaw officers attend the site today to determine the status of the property, and I do have some photographs if council wishes to see them, but it is still in quite dire shape. I think the owners are willing to listen to some suggestions, and they have indicated that if council forces them to clean up the property, that they will comply. However, we're still asking for council's direction to enforce that if their opinion changes.
Follow-up, Councillor Burton.
No, I'm not follow-up. She's follow-up. So would you need a motion from council to request that the owner lift the canopy to improve visibility into the site?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Burden, I don't think we have the authority to specifically say how they can bring the property into compliance. The discretion of the bylaw officers is something that is laid out in the legislation, and they would determine if the property was compliant with the bylaw or not. I don't see any authority in the legislation. CAO can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we can be that specific. We can certainly recommend and provide advice to the property owner.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure this is going to be unpopular, but, you know, number one, lifting the canopy doesn't do anything for the wildlife. Actually, what it does is it drives them out into the open, and, you know, then we hit them with cars and so on. So that's number one. Number two, we're also driving these people out. So at some point, they're going to end up falling out onto the streets. And I recognize that they're on private property. You don't see them. They are hidden in the bush. But at some point, when we continue to do this, and we have in most of the parks, we have cut the trees, and you know, it's great. You can look into what you call a park for miles, and we call it a park down here. But in the end, these folks have to go somewhere, and they will. And they're going to end up on the streets because there's going to be no place for them to go where they can do their thing, and they're going to. And it'll be out in the open, and we won't be able to drive by. And although we know they're there, when people come into town, when tourists come in, they don't know folks are in there. We do because we live here, but we really have to think this through a little more carefully than what we're doing. Yes, it's a mess, for sure. We could easily agree that it's, you know, it needs to be cleaned up and so on, but we need to. I believe we really need to think about what we're doing here, because we're pushing people around the city until what? There's at some point they're going to hit a wall, and when that happens, how are we going to address that? That's just something.
What you're saying is they've got nowhere else to go.
Yeah, I'm
okay.
saying they don't, and we're doing it to them. And I mean, we've moved them out of the center of the city. We have through those methods, through lifting the canopy and through making it so that, you know, we see them. Everyone sees them.
Are you saying we've got to find a place for them to go?
I know we're building something on Corefield, but clearly these folks aren't. You know, there's a long wait, and my feeling is this: they are out of town, really. They're quite a ways out of town. They're up on Despard, and I just don't know where they're going to go when we do this. Where are they going to go? Your backyard? I don't know, but I just think we really need to think this through, because they've got to go somewhere, and if it's not here, then where? Because we'll be following them to the next camp.
Yeah, okay. Point taken. Any further discussion? I'm going to call the question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Listening to Councillor Salter, I understand where she's coming from greatly. My question is actually to staff, because this wouldn't be the first time that we're cleaning up an encampment. And I realize that staff's been talking with the property owner, and this has been ongoing since 2017, and that they haven't done anything. So the property owner is not local, is my first question.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Patterson, the property owner is not local. The agent that we're dealing with is not local, but it's Island Timberlands. They do own local land all over the island.
Okay, then I'll leave it as such, because they're a corporate entity, and I think that they should be a corporate citizen and work with the city to. I am concerned with staff and a company or a firm, whoever is hired to do this work, and to be conscious of the fact that there's probably displacement of what is personal property to people, and that's difficult. Thank you.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just, as I think it through, I mean, could we not somehow meet with community groups, support groups, who could perhaps go out there and help move folks, you know, mental health, I mean, we have so many, SOS, we have so many service providers in our community. Could we not work with them to try and alleviate what's happening out there in a different way, rather than just going in there with our bylaw officer and moving them to the next spot?
I think that's going on right now, but I'll double check with the Oceanside Homelessness Task Force. Yes, Councillor Oates.
Yes, Your Worship. I think what the decision for us here tonight is, are we going to support our own bylaws and our own bylaw department or not, and simply nothing more than that. Anything extra that anybody may want to do, that's outside of the decision that we're asked to be made here tonight. The fact of the matter is that we have some of the residents in town that are paying taxes have complained and complained continually about this unsightly premises. So I don't think there's much of a decision for me to make. We have to support our bylaws and support the residents that are in the town paying taxes, and they have a right to live next to properties that are not unsightly. And so I will be voting in favor of the both of the recommendations.
Mrs. Comas, do you want to make a comment?
Your Worship, just for the information of council, in addition to this private property, it abuts property that city wells are on, and these people are encroaching more and more and into the wells on a daily basis, into the well areas. Now the wells themselves are fenced off, but it is creating a hazard for our employees going in there and making them very uncomfortable. There's debris and needles and things around where our employees are having to come in and work.
Well, there are people, working on the solution to this problem, so we'll talk about that later. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Okay, Mrs. Kaler, we Grant and Aid Select Committee, thank you very much. Who's on the Grant and Aid Select? Councillor Oates and Councillor Beal. Thank you very much for the good work. We have a recommendation that's pretty obvious and easy to read. Somebody multiplied the loaves and fishes and stayed away from the $75,000 or whatever it was. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Oates. Any questions, any comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you, and thank you for that work. Okay, we're moving into bylaws. First reading, Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 200115. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beal. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. All those opposed? Two readings, road closure bylaw number 2018, number 1543, a bylaw to close part of a highway, remove the dedication of part of a highway and dispose and convey the land. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. Another bylaw. Bylaw number 200114, Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 200114, Text Amendment Cannabis Regulations. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Thank you, that is carried. Three readings. Business License Amendment Bylaw number 2018, number 1483.2, a bylaw to amend Business License Bylaw. Parks and Open Space Amendment Bylaw 2000, number 1523.1. I'm going to take them both together. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Pardon me? Sure.
I just want to, this whole cannabis bylaw things that staff have been tasked with doing, I want to recognize the hard work that staff have done on this, and it's a moving target, and we seem to be right ahead of the curve on it. So it's good to be able to go when we go to AVICC in a couple of weeks' time to say that we've already started the ball rolling on that. So thank you to staff, and I think Kiva in particular has worked particularly hard on this. So
good point.
Just want to recognize that.
Okay, the final adoption of the Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 1425.3. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillors Patterson, seconded by Councillor Burton. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And finally, I need a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beal. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you. You know, I'm reading more and more editorials, parts of the paper about